So let me tell you a little bit about the Women's Leadership Forum and what we do. So this is a group, there are 12 members on the board, and this group is chaired by Luann and Ellen. And the Women's Leadership Forum is a community of alumni from P&G. And if any of you out there have the drive, the inclination and the resources and want to make a difference, please do consider joining this organization. Its mission is really to empower women and support gender equality. And as we do this, we hope to help uplift the personal and the professional growth of P&G alumni around the world. So there are about 4 initiatives that the Women's Leadership Forum has been working towards. The first was having a regional network, and the pilot was done in Europe. We're looking to see if this is something we'd like to do in Asia as well, and bring women together to have an advisory council for women in Asia. We had a very successful coaching program pilot, a DE&I statement and toolkit, and the career and enrichment and empowerment. This initiative on how to have women ready to be on boards is part of number 4. A little bit about these programs. So like I said, the advisory council was formed in Europe, and we're looking to reapply it in Asia. And if anyone's interested, that's my email and that's Luann's email. Please do reach out and let us know if you'd like to be part of this program. The coaching program, this was where we brought executive coaches who are P&G alumni and are now renowned coaches around the world to help coach other P&G alumni. So if there was, somebody is interested in being coached or wants to be a coach for other alumni, please do visit coaching.pgalums.com and we can link you into this program. And since I have your attention, the foundation asked me to also do a shout out. For the first time, the Fund for Gender Equality is actually going to be matching all new donations to the P&G Alumni Foundation. So please do consider giving generously. The money from the foundation actually goes to help a lot of very, very powerful cases. And on that note, let's come to the topic on hand. So why are we here? So in 2020, the World Economic Forum had projected that it would take 99 years for gender equality. And in 2021, during the pandemic, that number was revised to 136 years. So in the last year, through the pandemic, we have actually regressed. The pandemic has not been kind for women, especially not for women in the workplace. And so while it's well known that diversity is critical, it leads to better performance, we're still mired in all kinds of challenges, myriad of different issues getting in the way of having more women in leadership. Now, at the same time, when we look around at the P&G alumni, we find there are qualified, competent, very capable women, and women with really deep interest and intent and would want to join a board position. There's also alumni who are associated with organizations that are looking to increase diversity on their boards. However, often the dots are not getting connected, and we want to change that. So today we're making a start. This is our first webinar here. It's the first one with an Asian panel on Asian time. And we really hope to learn from the experience of the alumni and the women on this panel, and hope their perspective can provide us insights, best practices, and importantly, practical tips on how we can get board ready. And going forward, we plan to create a database of those of you who are interested to be on such boards, as well as those of you who have roles on boards, and see if we can share those opportunities with all the alumni. So now, everything I've said so far, as you can see, our focus is on women, on supporting women, but I know that there are men in the audience as well. And I've also talked about creating this webinar for Asia, and I know that there are people from other regions. There has been tremendous interest, especially from Europe with the time zone matching. And I know that there are others in the call as well. So if you suddenly find that you're not an Asian woman, it's okay. Please don't leave the call. Equality is not done in a silo or in tiny groups. We need everybody to come together to further the cause of gender equality. But more importantly, I think that what the panelists have to share today will be equally relevant for those who are not from this region, as well as for those men who want to get onto boards, because some of the tips are relevant for all. Okay, being on a virtual session makes it a little bit tougher to network and connect, but please use the chat freely. Introduce yourselves there. You might find other people that you worked with many years ago and have lost touch, and you suddenly see their name pop up there. As well as please do leave any questions you might have, any comments. We will take a look at all the questions that come up on the chat, and if we can't answer them in the session, we'll try and get the answers back to you. And finally, we typically reserve thank yous for the end of a session. But for today's session especially, I do want to start with gratitude. This is being done by people purely voluntarily, and I'm really been overwhelmed by the support we've received from so many alumni to just get this going. So special thank you first to Jesper and Gudrun. I had never worked with them, never met them, and they've reached out almost like friends with so much support to get this webinar going. A big thank you to Luann and Ellen and my colleagues at the Women's Leadership Forum board, who've all been extremely supportive, both about the topic and about making this happen. A shout out also to Anne and her team in Europe that we have learned a lot from. And then the chapters that have helped share the word about this session. And then a very big thank you to our 4 amazing panelists. Amazing women who have been so passionate about this cause of driving diversity on boards. So thank you, Joanne, Catherine, Sweetchen, and Gekchu. Thank you so much for being here. Let me do a quick introduction to introduce you to the audience, and then we'll get right into the questions that I know everybody is very eager to hear your perspective. So let me start with introducing Gekchu. Gekchu is from Deloitte and brings more than 25 years of experience in public accounting in Singapore, with a focus in serving multinational and local companies in real estate and the hospitality industries. She's a faculty member of the Deloitte University Asia Pacific and conducts leadership programs for Deloitte leaders in this region. But what really struck me was I read an interview of Gekchu, and her passion for supporting women leaders comes out so strongly. They also have research and programs to help women get on boards. So really glad you could join us, Gekchu. Welcome. Next, I'd like to put the spotlight on Jo Cruz. Joanne has been on several boards since leaving P&G, being a non-executive director for a media company, a university advisory board, as well as being a strategic advisor for L Catterton. But we remember her very fondly as the dynamic president of the P&G's $3.5 billion global prestige business. I have fond memories of working for Joanne when I worked on SK2, and what a ride that was. And I was really keen to have her here on the panel, especially because I've heard so many people tell me how they reach out to Joanne for advice over the years. And they're never disappointed because Joanne is always sharp, straightforward, insightful, but most importantly, leaves you feeling uplifted after a conversation with her. So thank you, Joanne. Thank you for being here. I know it wasn't easy, and really appreciate you making the time for this session.
Thank you.
I'd also like to thank Sweetchen for joining us today. Sweetchen, post P&G and IBM, joined Shell in 2003 and then retired as the chairperson of the Shell companies in Singapore in 2019. She's on the board of Capital Land, Singapore Airlines, Singapore Power Limited, and Woodside Energy Australia, and also chairs the National Arts Council and sits on public service boards. What a glorious career, Sweetchen. And I'm sure you found yourself being the only woman in many rooms. We're really so eager to hear and learn from your experience. Thank you so much for being here. And then Catherine. Catherine Ang is the Managing Director focusing on executive search, board services, leadership assessment in industry sectors of consumer, private equity, and retail in Singapore and the Asia Pacific. But what really separates Catherine from so many others is her passionate advocacy for culture and gender diversity in the boardroom. And I know that Catherine, as much as she looks for the right candidate, she spends a lot of time and energy working with the management team, the families, the boards, on really encouraging them to think about diversity and really finding ways to harness the power of diversity on their boards. And a fun fact, Catherine is also sort of P&G alumni because she used to work on the Braun business just before P&G took that over. So welcome, Catherine. Thank you so much. And we're eager to hear your perspective from a search point of view as well. Okay. Now with that, let's get started with the questions for today. Now with everything P&G, we always like to start with the data. And so before we start, let me just ask Gekchu, with all the research that you have and the reports that you've been through, could you help lay out the data for us? Where exactly do we stand, especially in Asia?
Thank you, Patricia. First of all, thank you, Patricia and the P&G alumni team for inviting me to today's discussion on a topic that I'm personally very passionate about. And as the program lead for Deloitte CXO program and Board Ready Women program, this topic is really close and dear to my heart. And like any typical accountant, I also can't help but start the conversation by sharing some data. Every 2 years, Deloitte publishes our Global Women in the Boardroom program report. And this report explores insights on gender diversity in the boardroom and covers 72 countries across the globe. The 7th edition of this report was released just last week. There were some encouraging developments that came out from the research. In particular, I wanted to share some key findings from a Southeast Asia perspective. I'm happy to share that 2 Southeast Asian countries, in particular Singapore and Thailand, ranked in the top 5 countries globally with the highest percentage of women who held CEO roles, with Singapore taking the top spot at 13.1% and Thailand at the 3rd spot at 11.6%. And Southeast Asia countries also fared better, with an average of 17.1% of women in board seats compared to 14.3% in 2018. So we have seen an increase in the boardroom. And also it outperformed the Asia average of 11.7% and closer to the global average of 19.7%. From a tenure perspective, tenure of women in the board seat in Southeast Asia has either remained stable or saw a general decline, with the average tenure decreasing sharply in Singapore from 5 years to 4.4 years. But I would attribute this decline could be due to a wider pool of qualified candidates. And overall, we are seeing that there is a crucial link between women's leadership and more diverse board. However, the rate of progress remains slow, as what Patricia has earlier articulated. Over to you, Patricia. I hope I have set the scene for today's topic discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's good to hear that there has been progress and increased opportunities for women in our region. Well, from the facts, let's move on to you as individuals and your personal journeys. Sweetchen, can I ask you and get your perspective on, as you look back on your journey, what do you think really helped you most to get onto all these different boards?
Thank you, Pat. Yeah, I think just listening to Gekchu, we can all we can all now be assured that there is a strong pipeline of female CEOs who can be ready for board positions. I wanted to just start first with the landscape. I think this is the right time for women to look, be active. If you're interested in board positions, to be active in going out there and expressing your interest and your desire to be in boards and because of strengthening corporate governance, in independence of directors, and ESG consideration as well, in women on board and diversity on board. So I think now is actually the right time. In terms of advice and my personal experience, I would say three things. One is start early. Don't wait till retirement. There's never a good time. You want to really start early if your desire is post-retirement, or even at this point in time, while if some of you are in active employment, to already start looking. You can start early by participating in boards, be it for non-volunteer boards, not-for-profit boards, or even regulatory bodies, which is what I have done. I was fortunate in that my last role was the chair of Shell companies in Singapore, and that gives me a platform to be visible. I then get the opportunities and request to join initially regulatory boards, and I took the opportunity to do so. So start early was my first experience. The second one was before saying yes, in terms of making the decision on whether you join a board or not. It's quite important to look at the board composition and look to see if there are adjacency where I could contribute to the boards that were looking for directors. I think that's quite important. When I was quite clear that when I make a commitment to a board, that commitment will be relatively long-term. It typically would range from 6 to 9 years. The corporate code of governance in Singapore, when you join a public listed board, it's about 9 years if you assuming you do your job well, and that is when beyond 5 years you will be deemed as 9 years you'll be deemed as not independent. So quite important that you do that I did groundwork to assure myself that the board composition is one that I can work with, and the needs of the entity, be it corporate, government, or not-for-profit, has needs where I can actually use my skills to demonstrate. Track record is important. I thought that when I got into one board, it was important that when I made the commitment to join a board, that I invest the time, energy, and to contribute, and to contribute well, and that track record and that reputation actually then would result in other opportunities. So Pat, I will stop here. That's been my experience.
No, interesting experience, and interesting that you say start early. I mean, there's so many of us when we're in P&G, we're not really thinking about how to start early. And Joanne, can you speak to that? Like, what are some of the blind spots that you think P&Gers have? And if they are interested to join boards later on, what can we do?
Sure. Well, thank you, Pat, and hi, everyone. Sweet Chen is absolutely right. But if you've already moved out of your executive role and are in retirement, don't panic. I was in my second year of retirement when I started to get onto this, I might be on some boards, that sounds great. So to blind spots, Pat, I'd just like to give you 3 thoughts on blind spots. First, a surprising one about the hesitancy of my long-term singular career at a blue chip company. The second one is where to start with networking. I'm not sure about most P&Gers, but I discovered I was pretty ordinary at networking. And third, to make sure your CV is actually a board-ready CV, not a CV that looks like a performance review from P&G or an executive CV. So let me start with the first one. There's an immense sense that, when you're in global P&G, when you're traveling the world, particularly in the US, everyone knows the the impressive, amazing company Procter & Gamble is. Coming back to Australia, less known, I was certainly not known. And there was a bit of a hesitation about the fact that I'd worked with at a blue chip for 27 odd years. And basically that's because the machine is full of super talented people and systems and operations that can really help you through the tough times. So what it's important to do is to share with headhunters and chairs that you have plenty of external examples. When you've worked on industry boards, Sui Chen referred to this, government associations, any committees, even with the P&G board, where there have been examples either with suppliers, customers, etc., where you've been able to influence, where you've been able to overcome obstacles, and where you've really helped shape the future. The second blind spot that I came up against was something I thought was pertinent to me about not really liking networking that much, but I found that every colleague or person that I've mentored, they've had the same anxiety. So I'm just going to give you a couple of sound bites on things you could look to do. First is almost get out your phone book. On your phone, look at the list of people you know, colleagues or past colleagues who are on boards. Reach out to them, email them, and basically ask them to connect and see if they can give you a suggestion, some advice, or even a future connection along the way. Yeah, every board that I've been on, and there's been 6 in the past, they have a search firm to place a new board candidate. But I can assure you that every board, every HR manager also asks every board member, who do you know? Do you know someone who would fit this role brilliantly? Secondly, think back to your university, committees, associations you've been on. Reach out to them and offer your services to see if you could be on one of their advisory boards or committees. I joined my university advisory board, and it's been a fabulous experience and helped get me connections that led to board roles. Secondly, I was on a not-for-profit government-funded board called Advance. And the way I came to get onto that was basically through doing a similar panel discussion to this. Their whole purpose is about ensuring repatriating expats are able to reintegrate into the business world with ease. And so after doing the panel, they actually asked me if I would be on the board. The third thing is to reach out to the headhunters you know are the go-tos in your respective country, and ask who are their board practice managers. And Catherine, as an example, can probably tell you a lot more about how to effectively reach out to them. And then if you get a little bit more game on the networking front, you can always look to the list of boards that you would love to be considered for. Have a look at their annual reports, have a look at their board makeups. Sui Chen mentioned that. See if you think you can add value or you have a skill set that isn't currently in the board structure and in the board of directors. And what you can do is actually reach out to the chairs and to the respective CEOs and suggest a connect. The third one is the CV. This was quite a surprise. I actually hadn't had a CV since I started in the company back when dinosaurs roamed the planet. And it became pretty evident to me in the feedback I was getting from my connects that my CV was more for an executive role. And really what I needed to do was tailor it to the job description and the proposition and the value that I could bring to the company. So as an example, if I was looking to join a bank and they were looking for someone who had digital capability and customer focus, or consumer focus as we call it, really focus the CV around that. Don't just keep putting down where you've done brilliant cost cutting or where you've been really good legally and things like that. Of course you have those, but really focus almost like an elevator pitch in your CV and your cover letter. So they were the couple of blind spots, Pat.
Jo, that's brilliant. I mean, so clearly laid out for us. It's very often you kind of sit back and hope that your glorious career has people coming to, ask for you to be on their board. But clearly there is just so much legwork to be done, or that we should be doing if we're really keen on a career in boards. Catherine, I really want to hear your perspective from a search point of view. You've placed a lot of people on boards. You've worked with people who are looking to place people on boards. What is it that they're looking for when they're placing women on boards? What are the companies thinking?
Thanks, Patricia. As you know, my company focuses on private equity and family-owned businesses. So my perspectives and answers today will be colored by those experiences. I wish I could give you guys an easy checklist, especially for those who are trying to get onto their first board position, because as we all know, your first board appointment is the toughest want to land. The truth is, there isn't a standard set of characteristics that we're looking for. Each board placement is unique, as Joanne and Gechu would share with you, driven by industry, by the organization itself, and the board culture. Most of my clients, they are very well networked, and they naturally have access to top leaders for board positions. They come to me, however, to help. I do see 3 core requirements. Firstly, it is the relevant industry experiences, but that speaks for itself. Secondly, a track record in scaling up businesses, as this remains the main objective for most private equity and family-owned businesses. Thirdly, it is the ability to influence key stakeholders. Now, as mentioned earlier, my focus is to determine the fit and for the clients. So for you guys, the P&G Alumni candidates, I would apply the following fit criteria. So can you make yourself relevant and deliver in a different ecosystem? So P&G is known for top performance culture, has the best-in-class systems and tools to deliver best results. But can you really deliver in a very different environment and ecosystem? Do you have the humility to work with less developed leaders and organizations? A lot of companies here in ASEAN, as well as the private equity portfolio companies, they are mid-sized companies. They are less developed, both in talent or in organizations. Are you someone who really enjoys sharing and developing others? So lastly, I would say at P&G, you are all trained to be brave and speak your mind. But the question is, do you have the ability and nuance to nuance your points and time them well? So these will be the few perspectives based on my experience. I hope they're useful for you. Over to you, Patricia.
Well, thank you, Catherine. Thank you. Brave and humility, and sometimes they can both go together for the betterment of any organization. But is there, as you've looked across the region, or maybe even with your oversight sometimes beyond the region, do you feel that there is anything that somebody who's looking to land their first board position needs to do to strengthen their CV? Sometimes we hear of a course that might be useful, or a training program that somebody should attend and add that to their CV. Is there any specific courses or something that you found useful or that you'd recommend?
I mean, in terms of courses, there are the usual suspect, your IMD, Wharton, and INSEAD. They offer board-ready programs. But I think a lot of online and company-specific programs are now available, especially for Asian companies. So they're very targeted kind of trainings for specific group of companies. In terms of CV, what Joanne said is 100% useful. You need to switch your mind and not focusing on your performances and achievements. Being an ex-P&G, remember, you will be perceived as someone who is already very qualified, if not overqualified. So you kind of have to switch into thinking, what is a board-ready resume based on the board that you want to join? So be really, so it's kind of custom-made, your answers, but board-ready differs from one board to the other. Whether you're applying for a board at an MNC, or listed company, or family-owned business, or it's a private equity a company, a portfolio company. But keep in mind to highlight the activities that shows your humility, your passion in developing others, mentoring, your non-profit jobs, whether it's in your community or in your organization or outside your organizations. Those become more important when you are addressing board-ready resume instead of your achievements. We all know in the first place, you're very good before you could get into P&G. And if you spend 10, 15 years, there's no doubt you are a top leader. But the question really is the other skills. Do you have a proof point that you can be an effective board member? Can you add something to expand this board? That would be the ultimate question they are asking, right? So interestingly, one thing universal is that if you have joined your first board, it becomes easier. If you have joined a first board, that is the one thing that carries the most weight in your CV. But if you haven't got your first board, then it will be about how do you then list out all the board related activities, your passion, your interest, and your humility.
Very clear, very clear. Getchu, I know that Deloitte does a program on helping women to be board ready so that they can land that first board position. And then hopefully they can take off. But can you tell us a little bit about that? And is that open? How do you select people for that program?
Yes, certainly. So based on what Catherine has mentioned, our Board Ready Women program is really for women who is going to step out of their comfort zone and looking out for the first board seat, and how we can prepare and get them be more confident for that role itself. So at Deloitte, we want to play a more active role in increasing diversity in the boardroom, and we want to take active, proactive steps in it. So in 2016, we actually launched the Board Ready Women program in Singapore to prepare senior women executive leaders for board service. And this is an exclusive program by invitation only to a cohort of 20 women leaders at each time. So every year we had a cohort of 20 women leaders. We work closely with a lot of organizations to invite their women leader to join us in this program. And the women leaders are then taken through a series of 4 half-day in-person sessions where they come together in a peer-to-peer support environment where they get to exchange knowledge, network, and engage like-minded women leaders, where they need to form strong connections and connectivity. We also bring to these women leaders subject matter experts and fellow business leaders where they get to learn about board readiness topics and 21st century topics that will get them prepared for board role. So besides being an expert in their area that they're good at, they potentially would need to know more about certain other areas to get them into conversations with other board members and to contribute in other manner positively during board conversations. So we also talk about current issues such as ESG, legal and fiduciary obligations, as well as their own personal branding, very much in line with what Catherine has mentioned about personal branding itself.
But that is amazing. So you already have like about 60, 80 women out there that have been through this program that are probably spreading the word and helping other women as well, and hopefully landing that first board position.
Yeah, in fact, after concluding our first sessions, we had our first cohort, we have one lady who actually successfully got the first board membership through one of our facilitator for the sessions.
Amazing, wonderful. I hope we'll have stories like that coming from the Women's Leadership Forum as well going ahead. So we've been talking a lot about landing that first board position. How do you get ready for that? But I also want to just understand the black box of actually being on a board and what that experience entails. So Swee Chen and Joanne, what has been your experience of being board members? What are some of the things that the group should be expecting if this is something that they're really going to be putting hard work to get to? Swee Chen, why don't you tell us maybe you can start. What has been your experience being on the board?
Yeah. I think there are boards and there are boards, and they are quite different depending on what type of boards they are, and they're quite different depending on what role you play on the board. Typically, the public listed companies, the larger companies, they are quite well resourced. And so you know that you have the expertise for the most times, and your role really is a lot of times quite focused on whether it's governance or more the longer horizon elements. I think for public listed companies especially, it's becoming more and more onerous. So if anyone is interested to be on the boards of a public listed company, just understand what the exposure and risk could be. I mean, there are risks and there are some nice things about it, and you got to understand it, because the climate, it's getting more and more complex. I was in a meeting once, and someone mentioned that in the past, large companies typically win class action suits because they can drag the case out longer. But now, when you read recent news, these large companies are actually losing these court battles. And in one of the boards that I am in, investors were looking to scrutinize board minutes. So you got to understand what you signed up for when you sign up, say, for a public listed company. When you're a member of a board that is like a not-for-profit, it usually is more resource strapped, and so you have to be prepared to put in more time to really guide the board and to guide the management team. And so my experience is I overestimated my capacity for a number of boards that I could sit in. And when having gone through the last 2 years, I thought I grossly underestimated the time requirement, and I got to know my own nature. I'm typically quite curious, and I want to know things. I want to know people, and so it just is more time than I had anticipated. Then I want to just leave with one thing, which is an advice that he was the ex-chairman of Royal Dutch Shell. And I asked him what is the most important thing for a board director to bear in mind. And he said, nose in, hands out. So you gotta find ways to really understand what's going on, be it in the industry, in the organization, but you have to resist the temptation to go in and steer and work like you are part of the management team. You've got to protect that independence quite well.
What was that phrase again, Swee Chen? Nose in, hands out.
Yeah.
Nose in, hands out. We'll remember that. Joanne, give us the reallys. What should one expect when you get onto the board?
Yeah, I'll do that. And just to recap, there were a couple of questions in the chat about what my first board experience was, or some of the members on the panel. Mine were the not-for-profit boards. One was the university that I recontacted back, who were wanting help with some recruitment in Singapore for Procter Gamble. So that connect got me onto the advisory board of UTS, University of Technology, Sydney. And the second one was Advance, which was the not-for-profit board, because I was on that panel discussion. So I eked my way up towards what ultimately was private equity and ASX listed boards. I found the whole board experience really rewarding. I found that my goal was to come back and help Australian businesses, coming back from a very global perspective for the last 2 decades, working to influence, helping drive the future, helping to turn around businesses, even getting to recruit a CEO for an ASX listed company. You don't get to do that at Procter Gamble. Selling and buying businesses, and even raising capital, I hadn't had any experience in. And it's interesting that my 2 points are very, very similar to yours, Swee Chen. So even beyond Procter, we're having so many similarities. And I think the first one speaks to particularly Australia, which is very litigious and very tough on boards legally and also in the press. And it all comes down to your reputation and also your personal assets. And you are not in, I don't have as cool a phrase as nose in and hands out, but you're not in their day-to-day. You're not the boss. You have to work out, and there was a talk about EQ before. How can you influence? How can you get people to really help educate you on their industry of a new board and help you help them? So one of the things that was really important, first and foremost, was to really connect with the management and the board and make sure that you understood what you could do to influence how to go about that. Making sure expectations are set, making sure policies are adhered to. Fundamentals like work health and safety programs are actually being reported to. Emergencies are being brought up to the board. Things like that were really critical. The minutes, I never focused so much on minutes in my life. I've written a lot, but the first job in a board meeting is to actually look at the minutes. And you really need to pay attention to how they're written, because they can show up in a court of law, and they can also be published. So make sure that they are replicating exactly what you've done, what you've agreed to, and what you're expecting, and what standards you're setting. Make sure you read all the documents. Make sure you pre-work documents with the teams. And one of the things that's interesting, I used to hear frustrated board members saying, oh, like the costs are too high. I've said this for so many meetings, the costs are so high. But with your nose in and your hands out, that doesn't help a management team actually action that. You really need to work out how, in a way, you can influence and get them to do the actions you need. You need to make requests almost that are very specific, and think through things like, I noticed the costs are high. We've talked about it a lot. What would be great is by X meeting to have a benchmarking study on the competitive landscape and what we need to do to reduce cost by Y. Have that minuted. They're the sorts of things that you can then action, as opposed to just keep moaning, which is what sometimes management think you're doing, about the cost structure. So that's just an example. I think the second thing is, it's not a part-time role. I was told this many times, and I thought it was people just trying to tell me how busy they were being on a board. But you really owe it to the company that has employed you. They've employed you for your skills, your capability, your industry understanding, your experience, to help navigate them to the future, to a successful future. It's not just about reading or turning up for the meeting. It's not just about reading the documents beforehand. It's about working and pre-working documents with management and the board, so you can get to resolution in the board meetings. It's about being on subcommittees. It's about knowing about the strengths, the opportunities, the threats that you can sort of see almost like as an elder, to help the organization navigate to a successful future, help them understand what could obsolete them in the future. The other thing is that when things come up like needing to raise capital in a pandemic, this can be a 24/7 gig. So when there's a crisis, and there will be things that go wrong, you really need to be sure that you have got the time. So it's an excellent point you raised, Sui Chen. And then the last piece of advice that I got given as I was getting onto boards was, don't be frightened to interview the board as much as they're interviewing you, which is very different, I guess, to when you're going for your executive roles. And the reason is that it's not the large organization, it's actually the 3 to 4, the 5 to 6 individuals that are navigating the organization. And this was great advice from Chris Della Puente, who some of you know, my old boss, mentor, and now a friend. And it was really interesting, because when I started to think about it, you know, I understood the values of the company, but did I know the values of each individual player? Did I know the risk appetite of each individual board member and what they were willing to push for aggressively or conservatively in board meetings and in agreements and disagreements? How did the dynamics in the board work? Was it a chair-driven board, or was it a very open board where people were able to have their voice? So they're the sorts of things that I think were really important. And so I always remembered that I was looking to be on a board for 3 to 5 years in the case of Australia. So I really needed to make sure that I felt I could really fit in and add value to that board group. So that's it from me, Pat.
No, awesome perspective. Awesome perspective. Really interest. This is hard work. Clearly, this is hard work. This is not necessarily cushy retirement, part-time job is what I'm hearing both of you say. So be ready to, put in your all and give it the time and really make the difference that you want to make in doing that. I just wanted to go. Yes, Vichan.
No, I just want to emphasize the point that Joanne made about the time, just to share that in the board meeting that I had last week, the pre-read was just under 2,000 pages. So,
You have to teach them the one-page rule.
I was going to say there's an opportunity for this.
I tried so often, but without success.
Oh, that's a lot of reading. I just wanted to run through some of the questions that were coming up in the chat. And thank you so much to everybody putting those questions in there. Such engaged group. Interesting. We've talked about providing the time and doing all of that. One of the questions was, what's the financials of being a board member? What are the different compensation structures? And I know we hear of boards where you kind of are volunteering on the board and it's for free and you're offering your time for free. And then there are paid positions. So how do you balance those? What are the insights? How do you get a paid role versus a free job? Catherine, maybe you could start by what is your perspective on compensation structures?
My advice is, if you can, don't do it for free. It's because, as you have heard, there's a lot of work. And also they will value your time. And so I really think if you can, absolutely go for a paid job, paid work. Generally, I would say the ASEAN countries where I work for with private equity portfolio companies and family-owned businesses, is around 60 to 100,000 per board of the business, the challenges of the business, and how much they want to pay depends on the complexity, if I may put it that way. Or sometimes it's very difficult to find a IT background, hospital board person, right? And then they're willing to pay whatever he's worth, his time, we'll pay for it. So it really depends, but I would say generally it's around 60,000 to 100,000 US dollars for a 4 to 6 times meeting. But you have heard from Joanne and Swee Chen, it is not just the 4 and 6 times meetings. You have to do a lot of prep work. So ask for the paid work. Yeah.
Swee Chen and Joanne, do you all have any other perspective on how does it work? Do you approach somebody for a paid board position versus do you offer to be voluntary on a board?
It can work in parallel. What tends to happen in my experience with people I've talked to, the first roles they get tend to be not-for-profit, or they tend to be advisory roles. And that's a very important stepping stone. Now they're voluntary. And you end up with a portfolio, you end up with listed private equity, because once you get the first one, as Catherine said, it's like boom, 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 boom. And then it's a key thing of how do you contain the right portfolio. But, sometimes you've got to really show your passion to want to get into this work, that you're educating yourself, that you're building up your skill set as a director, as opposed to being the executive who just happens to sit on the board. Because it is quite a different chair and a seat in this case, not a chairman's role or chairwoman's role. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the amounts of benchmark, like Procter & Gamble, and it is benchmarked on what the complexity of the role is, where it sits on the ASX list or the Singaporean Stock Exchange in terms of enormity of market cap. So if you're on a board that is in the top 10 in Australia, it's a very different pay bracket than if you're on the top 300, just simply because it sort of rounds out to percentages of what the organisations can afford as a total board. And that's something that is part of their charter anyway. They can only spend a certain pool of money unless they agree at an annual general meeting by the shareholders to actually increase the amount that they spend on their boards. So that's what tends to happen. So I don't really have much more to add than that.
So maybe I'll ask another question that has come up on the chat and get you, Swee Chen. How do you prioritize? So we've talked about networking, we've talked about investing in getting board ready, doing some courses, as well as reaching out to people directly, the CEO or the chair of the board, etc. And all three are important, but is there something that can you say this is 1, 2, and 3?
Yeah. I guess I think every individual's experience it's very different. My sense of how I prioritize may not be applicable to somebody else. It all depends on situation. It depends on what your desire is, and you know, how do you want to spend whatever spare time you have, right? Um, but I think one of the things that is most important, regardless of you know, the phase of life and your purpose, is really connectivity. Uh, I looked at my own personal experience. In fact, initially, what I wanted to do when I retired was education was important to me. I looked at what's going on around the world, and I thought, you know, no society, no country, no corporations can prosper if society is in strife, and therefore I wanted to do something in society. And so all I wanted to do was really be in the voluntary space, and having spent, you know, a large part of my career in airplanes, in meetings, in boardrooms, I was not ready to do the same after I declared that I was going to retire. Uh, then, you know, the temptation of saying, okay, you know, that little bit of time, perhaps I carve out 1/3 of my time to just stay relevant, to just get myself continue to be active in the corporate world. And so that's what I did. 1/3 of my time in the corporate world, and I thought, you know, 1/3 in these things that tugs at me, and then 1/3 free time. And by the way, that 1/3 free time has not been achieved so far. But in doing all of these things, that connectivity, you know, like what Joanne said, I think regardless of what you want to do, staying connected with people that share the same interest as you, who may be in position of knowledge or influence, I think it's top priority. All the rest, I think, depends on who you are as a person and what you want and the phase of your life.
I see in the chat quite a few comments coming from friends in Europe, and maybe some of what we've discussed has been very Asia-centric, but we will get back with other links and other, you know, people that you can approach for more Europe-specific questions. At some point in time, we want to take this global, and this topic is about connecting people across the different regions as well. So we will follow up with that. But we are on our last lap as it's coming up to the hour. So I just thought we could just go around the room and create our board-ready toolbox, like we probably would have said when we were all in P&G. What is your one tip to somebody who wants to get onto a board? What that might have worked for you or that you've seen work for others? What would be your one tip, or if you have one or two tips that you'd like to put into this toolbox? Catherine, would you like to start?
Yeah, I'm going to say soul search, really find why you want to sit on that particular board. And have you really understood both the organizations, the board culture, what you can bring really well. And if you feel passionate about it, then go for it. Do not do a board work for the sake of doing it.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Joanne?
Well, the problem is I'm Procter & Gamble through and through, so I've got three things, Pat.
Oh.
We always had three.
Let's put it into the toolbox.
So I think that the thing that I see so much is that there's so many people I've worked with in Procter & Gamble that would be fabulous on boards, because I do think we combine the brave heart and the humility. I do think, and it's very important that is adhered to. But I think So let's go for it. First, CV board ready. That was an aha for me, not an executive CV. 2, train yourself. I did the Australian International Company Directors course. I did it a year after I finished. It was just even great mental stimulation. It's a little bit pricey, but relative to the amount Catherine just talked about, it may pay off in droves. And the third thing is just get your phone out and look at the contacts, and you'll be surprised, even LinkedIn, how many of your colleagues, friends that you used to work with years ago are on boards or in companies that need someone like yourself. So I'd say be quietly confident, but just get out and start doing it.
May I just add one thing on that, Pat? That is, I find that early on is that how best to approach headhunter. Try to go via somebody who knows you well and who knows the headhunter. If you just do cold calling, it is quite tough because our mailboxes are always full, like yours. So try to go via somebody who knows you well and the headhunter well.
Good point. Good point. Gekchu, any tips for our toolbox?
Okay, I recall Swee Chen at the start of today's session mentioned about being active and expressing your interest. I think that resonates very closely with me. So I think within my organizations, most of my leaders are aware that I'm very passionate about youth educations and enhancements of capability of our youth, especially those in the disadvantaged sector. So when there are opportunities, they will come to me to work on these 2 areas. So my first 2 board seats are actually in this area, and they were recommended and endorsed by my 2 leaders in the organizations.
Express yourself, yes. And Swee Chen, any tips for people who want to get onto boards?
So like Joanne, the P&G Black is still in me, so 3.
Hey.
3 C's. So one I said earlier on, connectivity, key. Yeah, and you don't do it for self-interest. You do it simply because it's interesting. You feel you can contribute, which is the second one. This every opportunity that you have, right, in the areas that speaks to you, contribute, be it speaking, consultancy, providing advice. When you're in boards, don't be a passive board member. And the last one, I say choice. You do have choice. Don't jump into the first one. If the board is genuine in wanting you, they can wait. I've made boards wait 2 years for me. You choose the boards that you are in. Don't just jump at the first opportunity.
Awesome. Hey, thank you so much. I think there's just such a rich conversation here, such a rich discussion, and just so much powerful perspective. Jesper, if you can just put up the poll. We have 2 minutes before we wrap up. It'll just be helpful to hear from everybody. If you can just take, and you could take multiple points here, but we're just trying to understand how many in the audience are keen to be part of this journey, would want to learn more and be part of being connected with positions in the future. We'll just take half a minute to fill that out. And if we've got those checks there, maybe we move to the next poll. Did you find today's session? And the results are there as well. Let's move to the next poll. Did you find today's session useful? And if so, we'll try and see how we could expand this more often and get more people, share the perspective with more people. Okay, on that note, Swee Chen, Catherine, Joe, Gekchu, thank you so much for for joining us this afternoon. I found the perspective, extremely useful. So many things: start early, build your CV, how to do networking. Don't let networking just be that big hairy thing that you don't want to do. Humility, approach it with be brave but humble. Expect that it's going to be time commitment. Interview the boards. Be sure that you want to be on the boards. Train yourself. Demand what you're worth. Just very, very powerful thoughts in there. Thank you for your perspectives, for those insights, and for your warmth and for your generosity. I think I just enjoyed talking to all of you, and I really hope that all these perspectives will help all those that were in the audience going forward. We will follow up with an email to everybody so that we could, understand a little bit deeper what you are keen on doing. And as we pull together this database of those who are interested versus those who have roles, I hope we can work with Joe, Gekju, Sweet Chen, and Catherine going forward as well to further drive the cause of diversity on boards. Thank you very much. It's 4 o'clock and we will wrap up now. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.